Assalamualaikum and good morning class. So for today, I'm going to talk about chapter 3 in Malaysian economics, that is the socio-economic issue. So what are the socio-economic issues? So as we all know, socio-economic issues are the people's top concern, as these issues may have a negative impact on one's daily life. Among the prevalent socio-economic issues are poverty, inequality in income distribution, pollution, crime, religious discrimination, overpopulation, and corruption. So what do we expect students to be able to learn upon completing this chapter? First is to be able to define the meaning of poverty. Secondly, to be able to explain the differences between concepts of absolute poverty, absolute hardcore poverty, and relative poverty, as well as to identify the causes of rural poverty, urban poverty, and hardcore poverty. Later in this chapter, we will also expect the students would be able to discuss the measures taken to eradicate poverty, explain the causes of inequality in income distribution and the measures to narrow the income gaps, and last but not least, to be able to discuss the Islamic perspective on poverty eradication and income distribution. So now class, what is poverty? So later in the next slide, we will talk about the definition of poverty. So what is poverty? There are various definitions of poverty. So poverty is a socio-economic issue that negatively impacts the economic activities of the people. So when we refer to this slide, we can see one of the various definitions of poverty would be the insufficiency of basic needs, such as food, shelters, and clothing. However, basic needs vary based on the level of development achieved by a country. Some countries perceive basic needs as only food, shelter, and clothing, while for other countries, basic needs also include electricity, water, health facilities, and education. And in most countries, view poverty in terms of extremity. What are the extremities? So these extremities include serious malnutrition and starvation. So like we can see in the slide, there are three concepts of poverty in Malaysia. There are absolute poverty, relative poverty, and hardcore poverty, which we will later discuss in the next slides. So now, we would like to take a look at the level of poverty, how it is measured. It is measured by using the poverty line income, which is PLI. It is a level of income used to measure poverty that separates those who are poor from those who are not poor. So this level of income is considered a dividing line. How? Households which earn below the PLI are regarded as living in absolute poverty, while households with a gross income less than half of the PLI are defined as absolute hardcore poor. So let's see in the slide. This poverty line income, PLI, takes into account the minimum requirements of a household for three major components. First, they take a look at the food, clothing, and footwear, and non-food components such as rent, fuel, and power, transportation and communication, health, education, and recreation. The PLI is adjusted annually to reflect changes in the Consumer Price Index (CPI), with separate CPIs used for Peninsular Malaysia, Sabah, and Sarawak. For your information, due to high distribution costs, particularly in remote areas, therefore Sabah and Sarawak has the higher PLI if compared to those who are in Peninsular Malaysia. Now, in the next slides, I'm going to explain more about the types of poverty that exist in Malaysia, and we will further explain what are the first poverty, that is the absolute poverty. So now class, let's take a look at the meaning of absolute poverty. What is absolute poverty? Well, as we all know, poverty is defined as a condition of living limited by malnutrition, illiteracy, disease, quality surroundings, high infant mortality, and low life expectancy. Absolute poverty means lacking the ability to even meet fundamental human needs. And now, what is the fundamental human needs? It's the minimum basic necessities of life. For example, food, clothing, shelter. So here, in absolute poverty, if the gross income of a household is below the PLI, the household is considered as living in absolute poverty. Let's take a look at the example. In 1995, the absolute poverty PLI for Peninsular Malaysia was 425 ringgit per month, 601 ringgit per month for Sabah, and 516 ringgit per month for Sarawak. As you can see here, both Sabah and Sarawak has the higher PLI if compared to Peninsular Malaysia. Just like what I have already mentioned before, this is due to the more expensive distribution costs for Sabah and Sarawak if compared to Peninsular Malaysia. So what does this indicate? For instance, if a household in Sabah or Sarawak income lower than 601 ringgit per month or 516 per month, they are already considered as absolute poverty. However, in Peninsular Malaysia, they will only be considered as absolute poverty if their income is below 425 ringgit per month. This is because in Peninsular Malaysia, the cost is not as high as those in Sabah and Sarawak, especially in the remote area. For transportation costs, they are absolutely higher. So in 1999, the overall poverty rate in Malaysia was 8.5% with 409,300 per households. However, the poverty rate was improved to 5.7% per household in 2004. Hence, in 2005, there is a new methodology called 2005 methodology that is used to replace the traditional PLI. Now, we already know what is absolute poverty. Now, in the next slide, I will show you what is the meaning of relative poverty. That is the second type of poverty that existed in Malaysia. Now, class, let's take a look at the relative poverty, the second poverty types of poverty that existed in Malaysia. So, what is relative poverty? Relative poverty is based on the concept of relative deprivation by comparing persons worse off in society to persons better off. So basically, it is linked to income inequality between groups. For example, income differences between races, between urban and rural households, and between regions or states. When the income becomes more evenly distributed, the poor are those who gain, while the non-poor are the losers. So relative poverty income level is set as a percentage of the median income. Let's take a look at the table below. This table shows the incidence of poverty among ethnic groups from 1970 to 2007. So as we can see, as Malaysia is a multi-ethnic and multicultural country consisting of Malays, Chinese and Indians, and also others, so the incidence of poverty by ethnic groups is based on Bumiputra, Chinese and Indians. So as we can see here, the table shows that the incidence of poverty among all Malaysians ethnic groups had decreased by more than half from 1970 to 2007. So as we can see, initially Bumiputra has the highest incidence of poverty if compared to Chinese and Indians. However, towards 2007, Bumiputra has the highest decrease in poverty among these ethnic groups. However, Chinese still remains the lowest incidence of poverty, followed by Indians. As for the urban-rural poverty, as we can see, this is the urban-rural poverty for Bumiputra, Chinese, and Indians. Still, Bumiputra has the highest percentage of uh, poverty if compared to Chinese and Indians. And in urban-rural poverty, also we can see that Chinese has still remained the lowest in poverty incidence. So under the new economic policy 1970 to 1990, efforts to balance regional development were carried out by raising productivity, income, and the quality of life, particularly in less developed states. So how about poverty among states? The states in the West Peninsula Malaysia have always achieved the higher GDP than states in East, the northern states, Sabah and Sarawak. This is due to more development and higher growth rate in the west coast of Peninsula Malaysia as compared to the rest. As we can see, due to the geographical area, most development are done in the Peninsula Malaysia. Hence, Peninsula Malaysia will be able to have a higher GDP as compared to Sabah and Sarawak because they can attract more investors to invest in their area. Johor, Melaka, Negeri Sembilan, Perak, Pulau Pinang, Selangor and Wilayah Persekutuan are considered the more developed states. Meanwhile, Kedah, Kelantan, Pahang, Perlis, Sabah, Sarawak and Terengganu are those who are less developed states. So now we are going to take a look at the third types of poverty that exists in Malaysia, that is hardcore poverty. And we will discuss it in the next slide. So in the previous slides, we have already discussed the two types of poverty, that is the absolute poverty and relative poverty. Now let's take a look at hardcore poverty. Hardcore, which means extreme, yeah. This is actually an extreme or abject poverty in which basic human needs, for example, food, safe drinking water, sanitation facilities, healthcare, shelter, education, and information are severely deprived. So the concept of hardcore poverty actually a condition in which gross monthly income of a household was less than half of the PLI, which is the traditional PLI. Absolute hardcore poverty is caused not only by low income but also the inaccessibility to services. So in 1995, hardcore PLI was 212 ringgit 50 cent a month, which is half of the PLI. So therefore, if in 1995, the hardcore PLI was 212 ringgit 50, meaning to say the PLI for that year is actually around 225 per month. Therefore, if the PLI for Peninsular Malaysia in 2002 was 529 ringgit, PLI for hardcore poverty was 264 ringgit and 50 cent, meaning to say this is half of the poverty line income in Peninsular Malaysia. So if the household income is 264 ringgit 50 cents and below, they are already considered in hardcore poverty. The urban hardcore poor have their own support systems, and they are assisted by government agencies such as the Ministry of the Agriculture and Land Development agencies. So now we have learned about the three types of poverty that existed. The first, the absolute poverty. Second is the relative poverty. The third is hardcore poverty. In the next slides, I'm going to discuss what are the causes of poverty. And these causes are segmentized with different characteristics, such as rural poverty, urban poverty. And we will discuss it in the next slides. The causes of poverty in rural area. First would be the low productivity activities with limited skills and yield. Second, we will take a look at the low level of technology to support production. Third is the negative attitudes and lack motivation to increase the standard of living. These negative attitudes often occur among those who are in rural area. They have no motivation or they do not have any goals to actually better their life standard of living. Hence, they do not have any urge to earn more in order to increase their standard of living. And then one of the other causes of poverty would be the migration of young generation to urban areas left the unproductive old farmers in rural areas. So this young generation wants to seek a better life in urban areas. Therefore, they are leaving behind their family members who are doing these farming activities in this rural area. And this young generation with skills are not coming back to help the farmers to expand their farming activities to a higher level. And then some farmers do not own land. For example, they work on land owned by others. Okay, and then this is causing them to receive low income that cause poverty in rural area. And then there are also instability in the prices of agricultural products, and they receive competition from larger producers and high cost of production and medium of sales transaction. And the other causes of poverty in rural area would be the less development and job opportunity is less developed state. So in less developed state, they do not have that much job opportunities. So that is why poverty still occur in the rural area. How about in urban area? Urban area also have this urban poverty. And what are the causes? The first would be the high cost of living. For example, food, rental, and transportation. For example, you are staying in urban area with a very high transportation cost. Although you earn 3,000 ringgit, you still have insufficient budget to uh, make a living in this highly cost area. And then lack of free basic services such as health and telecommunication due to privatization. Another thing is lack of affordable spaces and difficulty in getting license for small income people to start up their businesses as a mean to earn side income. Another cause that cause the poverty in urban area would be people migrated from rural areas. They have very limited skills and qualification to secure a job with good salary. And last but not least, the limited availability for affordable houses and amenities due to the increase in urban area population. So these are the causes of poverty. Um, and later in this chapter, we will learn about the income distribution. And for that, I will pass the session to Puan Dayang Humida.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh and good morning to everyone. How are you today? So today we're going to cover chapter 3 and now we're going to cover the subtopic under chapter 3 which is income distribution. All right. So let's we get look to the content of this income distribution. So what is income distribution, everyone? So it refers to how the national income of the country is being distributed among its population. And as we know, our Malaysia, we have different races, Malay, Chinese, and Indian. We have so many regions, and we divide our country into rural and urban areas as well. So this national income distribution, it measures by the share of the total income earned by various income groups. So if everyone, for example, if everyone in the country earn exactly the same amount of the money, then the income distributed is perfectly equal. However, if only one person earns all the money, but all others does not earn any money, it means that the income distribution falls somewhere in the middle between equal and unequal. So let's we get look to the next slide. Okay, everyone, before I explain to you about this table, so let me explain to you the difference between income equality and what is income inequality, right? So basically income equality, it is equal income distribution, all right? However, inequality of income, it is related to the poverty that can be vary by the region, gender, education, and social status. And how does this national income distribution being measured? All right, so it is measured by the share of the total income earned by the various income groups. For example, in our country, it is calculated based on the three factors, either races or ethnicities, states or region, and between rural and urban areas. So now let's we look together about the table, the information that we can get from the table. So this table, it shows the inequality in income distribution by race. Okay, you can see there is data for Malay, Chinese, and Indians there. Okay, based on the table, we can see that we obtain this information from the economic planning unit for various years, and we can see that in 1957, the income inequality of the Chinese was the highest, followed by Indian and Malays. And if we can see in 1999, Chinese has the highest income inequality distribution, while the Malay and Indian shows improved from inequality as compared to the previous years. So this means that the poverty gap in more serious among the Chinese compared to the other ethnicities. So now, let's we take a look at the income inequality by region in our next slide. Okay, so in this slide, we get the data for state origin for this income distribution. And you can see in 1970, all right, so the mean monthly income for Peninsular Malaysia was RM264. In the highest mean monthly income falls under the state of Selangor and Kuala Lumpur, followed by the Penang, Negeri Sembilan. All right, however, for the lowest mean monthly income in Peninsular Malaysia falls under Perlis, Kelantan, Kedah, and Terengganu. So this information vary in 1990s, where the mean monthly income increased in Malaysia to RM 1,254, and the highest state with the mean monthly income still belongs to Selangor and Kuala Lumpur. However, Kedah, Kelantan and Perlis remain as the three states with the lowest mean monthly income. All right. So now let's we take a look at the income distribution under rural and urban area. All right, everyone. So now the difference between urban and rural areas in their distribution of income. All right. So due to the impact of dualism, all right, after British colonization, the rural household, they earn a much lower mean monthly income after independence, as shown in the table. So as we can see, in 1999, the rural incidence of the poverty further decreased to 14.8%, while the urban poverty reduced to 3.3% as compared to the previous year. Okay, so this urban and rural area, it managed to increase the mean monthly income, although the urban-rural income inequality gap was still quite wide, and the gap has become narrow in the 2016 later on. So now we look at the causes of the inequality of income distribution in our country. Okay, what are the causes of this income inequality distribution in our country? Okay, so for me, it might be due to the laissez-faire economy at independence in our country, and with the growth was the main objective here. Okay, as the more economic development was carried out in urban area compared to the rural area, so the mean household income for the urban area was higher compared to the rural areas. And besides that, as more economic development due to the rubber plantation and tin mining took place in this west coastal of Peninsular Malaysia compared to the coast and northern states at the west coast, especially Selangor, recorded where they recorded the higher income. All right, and the more development also took place in the Peninsular Malaysia than in Sabah and Sarawak, where these two states have lower income. Okay, in the terms of the ethnic group, we can say that Malay were economically backward, since they are still engaged in the agriculture sector, and that has a lower in return of income. And this is why Malay has a lower mean household income. If we look in the capitalism, one who is more productive with get more income, unlike the communism, which require all to have the same amount of money. So if we look at this slide, the second causes of inequality is the imbalanced development among the region due to the income inequality. So as mentioned earlier, for example, in the most peninsular region, the development is much more as compared to the Sabah and Sarawak due to its geographical area. And under the third causes of this inequality of income distribution, we can see the recession in 1980s after the NEP that caused the poor economic growth in our country. So this is due to the high employment rate and poor performance of the private sector. In our country, we can see that it is very much affected by the world challenges and events like the Asian financial crisis in 1997 and 1998, which is under NDP, which is it's further the widened income gaps in this country, as well as we can see the uncertainty in the world economic after the NVP, for example. All right, so in the September 11 in the United States of America, and the outbreak of the SARS, which has also affect our Malaysia economic growth. So in the next slide, we will look at how we measure the gaps of this income distribution. All right, so now we look at the measure that has been taken by the government to narrow the gap of our national income distribution. Okay, basically there are four measures that has been taken by the government to look at this problem. Okay, the first one we call it as NEP, which is the New Economic Policy, NDP, which is National Development Policy, NVP, National Vision Policy, and NEM, New Economic Model. So now we look at the NEP. So what has been taken by the government as initiative to help the Malaysian people. So under NEP, we are giving our Bumiputra in an equitable share of the new job created in the professional, managerial, and technical categories. So this Bumiputra, we will look at the level of education and skill that they have, and we also upgraded the skills through training and retraining. So besides that, the Bumiputra participation in the SME also increased through this subcontracting, franchising, and their activity with the joint venture between Bumiputra and non-Bumiputra. And this NEP, we can look at the private sector roles as well, where this sector increased to help the government to achieve the new economic policy objective, where the government also implemented the low cost and the medium cost housing loan in the urban areas. So these types of initiative can help the citizen easily buy the house in the urban area, where the price of the house slightly reduced in that particular years. So besides that, the inflation rate in Malaysia also kept reasonably low at that time, where the farmer also encouraged to manage the large size of farms and carry out the non-farm activities as well, where they start to commercialize their product to outside the rural area. And more development was carried out in the less developed states, including Sabah and Sarawak. And the next one we can see is the plan that the government do under national development policy. When under these strategies, it also include in reducing the disparities between the urban and rural population, and among the states and region in our country via sustainable income generating avenue, and by improving the access to the basic needs such as housing, education, healthcare, utilities, and also transportation. And this development will carry out in the less developed region through regional growth center. And the intra-ethnic disparities were addressed by raising the economic through enhancement skills and capabilities. For example, we never differentiate the races, talent, and skills, and we give equal housing, education, healthcare, utilities among people in the urban and rural area. Okay, so now we look at the third measure taken by the government to solve the problem of inequality income distribution in Malaysia. So under this third measure, so we call it as a national vision policy, and it is basically we have four pillars, okay, that we taken to solve this problem. The first one is the One Malaysia, the government transformation program, as the number 2 pillars, and the third pillars is new economic model, and the last one is the 10 Malaysian plan. As we can see, the 10 Malaysian plan, it is falls under 2011 until 2015. So under this Malaysian plan, we are trying to creating equitable opportunities for all Malaysian to enable their participation in the economics according to their requirements and needs. And besides that, we are trying to provide the social safety net for disadvantaged group that stress with the access to the health, education, and basic infrastructure. While the mechanism for targeted income will be enhanced as general subsidized as the phase out. So in the third objective of this 10 Malaysian plan, it's also inclusive society is set to be characterized by the narrow inequalities, which absolute poverty, irrespective of race, and eradicated. While this assistance will be provided to those who need help the most. Okay, and the last one, okay, we can look at the new economic model as well, where this new economic model we focus on the rising income level for the all races of the Malaysian, and the advantageous group, for example, the bottom 40% of the Malaysian income strata, where the 77.2% of whom are Bumiputera, and many which are located at Sabah and Sarawak. And of course, this new economic model is to emphasize on the eradication of relative poverty. So in the next slides, we will discuss further about the Islamic perspective on poverty and income inequality, and I will pass this session to the Ms. Zara. All right, let everyone, bye.
Assalamualaikum and good morning. Hi, we meet again. So now I'm going to cover the last part of this chapter 3, that is the Islamic perspective on poverty and in income equality. So now let's see. In Islam, God owns everything, and it provides material sustenance for humanity. So as poverty will disrupt peace of mind, economic growth and development, the Muslim poor should bear the calamity that befalls him with patience, seeking provision from Allah and striving to earn a living for himself and his family. So from here, we can see that poverty in Islam is related to the concept of necessities. So if one does not possess sufficient necessities to fulfill his basic needs in each of the following areas, like religion, the physical self, knowledge, offspring, and wealth, then he is considered poor. There are two categories of poverty in Islam, which are the poor and the needy or destitute, and they are exempted from paying zakat. So poverty in Islam does not separate material needs from the spiritual needs of human beings, as Islam believes that the fulfillment of material needs is essential for achieving spiritual solace. We will cover only material poverty in this section. So poverty in Islam is categorized into two groups, like I've mentioned just now, the poor and the needy, or destitute, which are exempted from paying zakat. And in Islam, there are also measures to eradicate poverty. So Islam encourages the people to work hard to save themselves from poverty, to cover their basic needs such as food, clothes, shelter, education, and health care. So the government must help through anti-poverty programs that directly benefit the poor. So they must intervene in social and development aspect to ensure the poor can live to pay for all the necessities such as food, clothing, and shelter. So various anti-poverty programs to benefit poor households should be implemented. Islam, as a way of life, emphasizes on the collective responsibility of the society through paying zakat, um, giving sadaqah, practicing ahsan, and the concept of neighbor and their rights. Now let's take a look at some notes. What is zakat? Zakat is actually the prime source for an Islamic economy, as it is collected from a full 1 year possession of wealth. It is an obligatory financial levy on all surplus wealth, agricultural income of all able-bodied Muslims. So those who are able-bodied, those who are able, should pay this zakat. So the main objective of zakat is to meet the needs of the poor and the destitute. So the Malaysian government collects zakat from these able Muslims through Pusat Pungutan Zakat (PPZ) under Jabatan Agama Islam with close supervision by Baitul Mal. And what is sadaqah? Sadaqah is actually a voluntary charity given by individuals over and above the payment of zakat. It is from the sincerity of faith from the person who gives it, as it is not compulsory. Like zakat, it is compulsory for those who are able-bodied, but for sadaqah, it is not compulsory. However, it is actually more to a voluntary charity. There is no such requirement on when and how much to donate. According to Al-Hadith, sadaqah must be given in such a way that even the left hand or the donor must not know what the right hand gives. The third one would be ahsan. Ahsan is the term used for doing good things for others in the cause of Allah. So Allah had created human beings with various capabilities and potential, with some are born into rich families, some are born in families that is struggling to make ends meet. So here Islam has ample provisions to achieve a fairer distribution of income and wealth. As for we already learned in chapter 1, Islam always emphasized on fair distribution of income and wealth, where the rich could not neglected the poor. So that wealth does not circulate only among the rich of few. Al-Quran. And we will surely test you with something of fear and hunger and loss of wealth, leaves and fruits, but give good tidings to the patient. So the rich and capable Muslims in the society must voluntarily help the have-not group. The have-not group refers to those who are poor or needy. It is the responsibility of each Muslim to play its role in eradicating poverty. For instance, all able Muslims must pay zakat from their surplus wealth and agricultural income to assist the poor. So now what is the poverty and inequality in income distribution from Islamic perspective? Class, Islam insists on an income redistribution mechanism to achieve social justice, which gives rise to spiritual salvation and human happiness. However, some income inequality is allowed since it promotes individual initiative. As man has been endowed with different capabilities, intelligence, skills, and potentials, and born into different backgrounds of rich and poor families, it leads to unequal income and differences in the distribution of accumulated wealth. Hence, Islam recognizes income inequalities among the people that does not grow wider. When there is inequality in income and wealth distribution, relative poverty will exist. Therefore, the guiding principle to achieve a fair redistribution of income and wealth is emphasized. So here, if we take a look at here, this is the measures to solve inequality in income distribution. There are legal measures. Then these legal measures are divided into two. First is the positive measures, and second one is the prohibitive measures. what is the positive measures? So these positive measures include zakat and law of inheritance, while prohibitive measures include prohibition of interest, hoarding of wealth, wasteful expenditure, and unhealthy business. So the optional measures are divided into uh, voluntary charity or charity of surplus, which is called sadaqah in Islam. So if we take a look at the positive measures, zakat is a tax comprising percentages of personal income of every kind made annually under Islamic law to use for charitable and religious purposes. So it is an obligatory measure to be paid by richer Muslims to redistribute the income to the poor. Hence, zakat is an important approach to wealth distribution for reducing the income gaps between the rich and the poor. And what is the law of inheritance? Law inheritance also leads to redistribution of the total wealth of the deceased according to the will of God. So it accelerates the distribution of income and wealth among Muslims. According to Islam, the property of the deceased after settling his or her debt will be divided among his or her close relatives when he dies. And these relatives such as spouse, parents, descendants. These descendants are sons and daughters, and brothers and sisters. So in the absence of close relatives, this property goes to the other remoter relatives such as uncles, aunts, cousins, nephews, and others. So here the property of the deceased divided in proportion to faraid. What is faraid? Faraid is the Islamic law of inheritance. However, if the deceased is without a close relative, his or her property will be taken by the state to distribute to other citizens, including the poor and the destitute. Now let's take a look at the prohibitive measures. Islam has already implemented several prohibitive measures so that all unjust, unfair, and illegal means of earnings are declared as unlawful or haram and hence is prohibited. So the following are some of the measures. First, the interest or riba, because interest is forbidden in Islam, haram in Islam. So in economic terms, interest is reward of capital. However, Islam views it as the root of many socio-economic evils. Second would be hoarding of wealth. What is hoarding of wealth? Hoarding or an unnecessary accumulation of wealth is considered a wasteful. Uh, it can disrupt production and cause unequal income distribution. So the rich become richer and the poor become poorer. So this is why hoarding the unnecessary wealth is prohibited. The third one would be Muslim, especially wealthy ones, are not allowed to be wasteful and spend money unnecessarily. Instead, wasteful money should be saved to the state or the government can use these productive purposes to benefit the poor. Last but not least will be the unhealthy business. What are these unhealthy business? They are the businesses and activities that are prohibited and totally banned in Islam, such as hoarding of goods, selling of illegal or defective goods, and cheating on weights are all considered unhealthy. What are the optional measures? So this is the last slides in this chapter. We are going to talk about the optional measures. The first would be the voluntary charity or sadaqah, and the second would be the optional charity contribution. The voluntary charity or surplus, charity of surplus is actually called sadaqah in Islam. So it is the ideal measure for Muslim and acts as the highest degree of charity. For every Muslim, sadaqah is a moral obligation. So this is a charity of surplus, which is over and above the payment of zakat. So when a Muslim is giving sadaqah, he is able to seek pleasure from Allah So in Islamic terms, sadaqah means voluntary charity. So this sadaqah or voluntary charity encompasses any act of giving out compassion, love, friendship, and generosity to any individual. So the second one would be the optional charity or contribution. The sharing of wealth and resources as an optional charity is advisable for rich members of the Muslim community. It is a moral duty of contribution for those who possess wealth and property. So class, we have come to the end of this chapter 3. So I hope by learning this chapter, we can learn more about the socio-economic issues. We can finally define poverty, and then uh, explain the differences between the poverty, what are the measures to eradicate poverty, what are the income distribution, and also what are the Islamic perspective on poverty and inequality in income distribution. Bye bye.